You think you know Jack and the Beanstalk, a boy, a cow, a magic vine, and a greedy giant. But beneath this children's tale lies something older, darker, and far more sinister. A story whispered across millennia, older than the pyramids, older than the Bible. A tale of giants, gods, and forbidden realms, where a single foolish trade can blur the line between life and death. Welcome, Darklings. Prepare to climb beyond the story you thought you knew. The wind cut through the village like a knife, rattling shutters and whistling through empty streets. Shadows clung to the corners of cottages, and the air smelled of damp earth and desperation. In a small, crumbling home on the edge of town, a boy named Jack lay awake on a straw mattress. His stomach twisted with hunger, a hollow echo that seemed to whisper in the dark, "Nothing awaits you." His mother stirred in the dim candlelight, counting the last coins she hoped might buy bread. There was none, only a thin, mournful silence pressed against their walls. "Jack," she said, voice trembling, "we have nothing left. Take the cow to market. Sell her, or we starve." Jack's heart sank. The cow was more than food. She was the last fragment of their life, their lifeline. Yet his mother's eyes were hollow pools of fear, and he knew there was no choice. He pulled on his worn boots, the leather stiff and cracked, and stepped into the gray morning. The village was silent, as if the world itself had stopped breathing, waiting for something terrible to happen. The path to the market wound through fields blackened by frost. Jack gripped the cow's rope tightly, his mind haunted by stories he had heard of the world beyond the rumors of strange creatures, giants, and treasures hidden where no man should go. But a boy is a boy, and hope is a dangerous thing. Even in the cold and emptiness, he felt the flicker of possibility. It was then he saw the man, a figure standing under the skeletal branches of a grassed, leafless tree, wrapped in a cloak darker than the clouds above. His eyes gleamed like wet stones, and in his hand he held something small, something alive. "A trade," the man whispered, voice curling around Jack's fear. "Your cow, for these." He offered Jack a handful of beans, each glinting faintly as if they held their own strange pulse. Jack hesitated. The beans were small, fragile, ridiculous, even, but something about the man's gaze, cold and certain, made him shiver. "Magic," the man said. "They grow into the sky, into realms you cannot imagine. One climb and all your hunger, all your sorrow will vanish." Jack's mind wavered. He thought of his mother, hollow-eyed and shaking with despair. He thought of the cold, empty nights, the gnawing hunger that never ceased. And without truly knowing why, he handed over the rope. The cow's eyes met his for a moment, wide and pleading, before she was gone. The man disappeared into the mist, leaving Jack alone with the beans. They felt heavier than stone in his palm, as though each held a secret that should never be known. That night, the boy dreamed of climbing endless sky, climbing into shadows, climbing into whispers, older than memory. And in the darkness, he did not notice the soil shiver, the first tendrils of a vine breaking free. Jack woke to a sound that did not belong to the waking world. A deep, almost liquid groaning, like the earth itself was stretching after a long sleep. The morning light filtered weakly through the cracks in the walls, but even the sun seemed hesitant, pale, and trembling. He rubbed his eyes and stumbled toward the window and froze. Where the beans had fallen the night before, the ground now bulged and twisted. A great stalk, thick and glistening, shot up into the sky. It coiled like a serpent, winding higher than the clouds, vanishing into mist. The air around it vibrated with a low hum, a resonance that made Jack's chest ache. This was no ordinary plant. It exuded a strange, intoxicating scent, sweet yet metallic, like blood and honey mixed. Jack's first instinct was fear. But fear, in a boy like him, often carried curiosity in its shadow. He reached out, brushing his fingers against the stalk. The surface was warm, alive, pulsing with an almost imperceptible heartbeat. A shiver ran down his spine. He felt as if the vine was watching him, sensing his intent, measuring the weight of his soul. Night fell, and Jack could not sleep. The stalk seemed to grow faster now, stretching past the stars, twisting into shapes that defied logic. From its coils came strange sounds, faint whispers, the echo of laughter, the scraping of enormous feet over stone. Something lived at the top, something old, something that remembered before humans had names. Driven by a mixture of dread and wonder, Jack began to climb. The rough surface of the stalk cut his palms, but pain was nothing compared to the pull of that unknown world above. Clouds swirled around him, thick as wool, hiding the sky and the earth alike. Below, his village shrank to a speck. Above, a strange light shimmered, golden and terrible. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning here. Jack's breath came in ragged gasps as he climbed higher, each step carrying him further from life as he knew it. The air grew colder, thinner, charged with a power that made his skin crawl. And then, through the mist, he saw it. A great castle, stone and shining, hovering above the clouds as if it had always been there, watching. The castle walls were carved with grotesque shapes, faces twisted in laughter and agony, and massive doors loomed like the jaws of some sleeping beast. Jack's heart thumped, equal parts terror and anticipation. Somewhere inside, the giant waited, the guardian of treasures no mortal had ever seen. And yet, something whispered to him, low and insistent, a voice older than memory. Climb, take, survive. Jack didn't know whether it was courage or madness that carried him forward. But he stepped through the clouds, onto the edge of the castle, and into a world that would never forgive him for entering. Jack's legs trembled as he stepped through the castle doors. Inside, the air was heavy, thick with the scent of burning wood and something darker, sweat, iron, and something faintly rotting. The room was vast, larger than any building he had ever seen. Shadows clung to the walls like living things, stretching and twitching as if the very stones were watching him. A voice, soft and deliberate, echoed through the hall. "Who's there?" Jack froze. From the shadows emerged a woman, enormous but not monstrous. Her eyes were pale, reflecting the flickering firelight. Her hair hung like molten silver, and her skin was as smooth and cold as marble. "Go away," she said, voice trembling slightly. "My husband, he eats boys for breakfast." Jack swallowed hard, fear knotting his stomach. And yet, there was something in her gaze, a flicker of pity, or perhaps curiosity. She stepped aside, revealing a table set for dinner: bread, cheese, and a bowl of steaming milk. The warmth of the fire hit him like a wave, but it did little to chase away the feeling that he had crossed into a world that was never meant for him. He sat cautiously, aware of every shadow, every creak in the floorboards. The giant's footsteps echoed through the castle like thunder, each one shaking the walls. The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. "He comes home soon. Hide, boy, hide well," she whispered. Jack's pulse quickened. From somewhere deep in the castle, a voice rumbled, low and terrifying. "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman." The words twisted in the air like smoke, curling around Jack's bones. They were older than the castle, older than him, older than the world he had known. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, yet his eyes were drawn to the treasures scattered across the room. A bag of gold, glinting faintly in the firelight. A hen with feathers that shimmered like molten metal. And, in the corner, a harp that seemed almost alive, vibrating as if it could sense his presence. He understood, in that moment, that this place was not just a castle, it was a threshold, a realm that had stood at the edge of the mortal world for longer than anyone could remember. And he, a boy driven by hunger and reckless courage, had climbed straight into it. The giant's wife stepped closer, her eyes locking on his. "Do not anger him," she said softly. "He is no ordinary creature. What you take from this place, it is not yours to hold. And yet, the vine brought you here." Fate has a twisted sense of humor. The sound of the giant's steps grew louder, echoing through stone halls like a drum of doom. Jack's breath caught, heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. In a world older than memory, he was small, fragile, and utterly mortal. Yet he had climbed here, drawn by desire, driven by hunger, and the first act of his daring theft was about to begin. And in the shadows, the whispers waited. Jack's eyes darted to the bag of gold resting near the hearth. It glimmered unnaturally in the firelight, almost calling to him, whispering promises of warmth, safety, and power. The air around him seemed to hum with energy, thick with attention older than memory. Every instinct screamed to run, but greed, hunger, and a strange thrill rooted him to the spot. The giant's wife had disappeared into the shadows, leaving him alone. The footsteps of her husband rumbled through the castle, a terrifying rhythm that shook the walls, echoing in Jack's bones. Fee, fi, fo, fum. The chant grew louder, vibrating in the very air, in tune with the pulse of the beanstalk outside. Jack moved carefully, each step measured, heart pounding like a drum. He reached for the bag, its weight heavier than expected, as if it held not just gold, but the gravity of the world itself. The room seemed to shift, shadows stretching, twisting, and curling toward him. The treasures were alive in their own way, testing him, tempting him, whispering that he could take them, but at what cost? A deep, guttural snarl echoed through the castle, and Jack froze. The giant's shadow stretched across the room like a storm cloud, each footfall shaking the stone floor. He pressed the bag close to his chest, breath coming in short, ragged gasps. His mind raced. Run, hide, survive. The choice was simple, but the execution would be perilous. He crept toward the staircase, a winding spiral of stone that led to the stairwell of clouds and sky. Every step brought him closer to freedom and closer to death. Behind him, the giant's sniffing voice rumbled, sharper now, angrier. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Jack's hands shook, but his resolve hardened. He thought of his mother, pale and hollow with hunger, waiting below in the village that had forgotten the sun. He thought of the cow, gone, the last tie to a life that had offered him nothing but despair. And with that, he took a daring breath and bolted. The bag of gold swung heavy against him, pulling him off balance. Shadows of the castle seemed to reach for him, clawing at his sleeves, tugging at his ankles, trying to drag him back. The giant roared in response, a sound that split the air and rattled Jack's skull, shaking the clouds around the castle. Up the spiral staircase he ran, lungs burning, hands bleeding from the rough stone. The mist outside swallowed him, and for a moment, the world seemed to vanish entirely. Then, the beanstalk appeared beneath him, twisting like a living serpent into the void. Jack clung to it, gripping the pulsing vine as if it were the only thing keeping him tethered to life. Below, the giant's roar echoed through the clouds, then the trees, then the very earth itself. Jack descended faster than he thought possible, the bag of gold clutched tight, the wind tearing at him, screaming in his ears. Every second felt like an eternity, and every heartbeat a drum of doom. When he finally touched the ground, gasping, trembling, he realized something horrifying. He had survived. But the world he returned to would never feel the same again. Somewhere above, in the clouds, the giant waited, watching, patient, ancient, and Jack, small and mortal, had only just begun his dark journey. The village lay silent under a shroud of mist as Jack stared up at the beanstalk. By daylight, it seemed impossible, a living tower that scraped the clouds like a finger pointing to a forgotten heaven. The gold weighed heavy in his bag, but it did little to calm the gnawing fear in his chest. Each heartbeat carried the echo of the giant's voice, fee, fi, fo, fum. He had survived the first climb, but the memory of the castle's shadows lingered, curling around his mind like smoke. His mother slept fitfully, unaware of the cosmic thread he had pulled, of the ancient forces now aware of him. Jack felt small, mortal, and yet drawn upward by the invisible tug of greed and destiny. As night fell, he climbed again. The air grew thinner, colder, sharper. The clouds thick and suffocating. Shadows moved differently this time, writhing around him, whispering in tongues he almost recognized. The beanstalk itself seemed alive, testing him, pulsing beneath his fingers like a beating heart, as if measuring whether he was worthy or whether he would fall. Hours passed, or minutes. Time had lost all meaning. When he emerged above the clouds, the castle loomed larger, more grotesque than he remembered. The stone walls were carved with twisted faces and impossible shapes, eyes that seemed to follow his every movement. From the mist, the faint melodic clucking of a golden hen reached him, a sound both beautiful and terrifying, echoing like a warning. The giant's wife appeared from the shadows once more, her eyes wary but sorrowful. "You climb again," she said softly. "And again, you trespass. You do not yet understand the weight of this world." Jack's fingers brushed against the hen's golden feathers, each one shimmering like liquid sunlight. The creature was alive, and he could feel its power humming through the air. The pulse of life, magic, and something older still. He knew the giant would awaken. The woman's warnings faded into the distance as temptation gripped him. The moment was brief. From deep within the castle, a low rumble began, vibrating the very stones beneath his feet. Fee, fi, fo, fum. The chant rolled like thunder across the halls, growing louder, angrier, alive. The giant stirred, sensing the theft, feeling the violation of sacred rules older than man. Jack seized the hen, clutching it close. Its warmth spread through his hands, almost human, almost aware, whispering secrets of life and death he could not yet comprehend. And then, the chase began. The great creature's footsteps shook the clouds as the giant's voice followed him, a monstrous echo from above. Jack descended the beanstalk faster than before, clutching the golden hen. The wind tore at him, the vine pulsing like a living thing beneath his fingers. Shadows from the castle seemed to reach, trying to claw him back, to reclaim what had been stolen. When he landed, he gasped, the hen in his arms glowing faintly in the moonlight. Behind him, the clouds swirled as if the giant had vanished into the mist, but Jack knew better. Somewhere above, ancient eyes watched, waiting. And Jack understood, with a shiver that ran deeper than the cold night air, that he had only just begun to unravel the nightmare beneath the beans. The night was silent, but Jack could not sleep. The golden hen clucked softly in her cage, a sound that seemed almost human, vibrating with a rhythm older than memory. His mind raced, haunted by the giant's footsteps, by the shadows of the castle, by the whispering pulse of the beanstalk stretching endlessly into the sky. He had stolen treasure, yes, but at what cost? By the next evening, Jack's hunger for food, for gold, for something beyond understanding pulled him upward again. The beanstalk pulsed beneath his fingers, alive and aware, testing him, reminding him that every climb had consequences, that the world above was not meant for the living. When he emerged from the clouds, the castle loomed like a jagged monolith, its walls carved with twisted faces, frozen screams, and eyes that seemed to follow him. The air was thick with the scent of iron and flame, and somewhere deep inside, the low hum of magic vibrated like a living thing. Jack moved cautiously, every step measured. In a corner of the great hall, perched upon a pedestal of black stone, was a harp. Its strings shimmered like spun silver, and as he approached, the instrument began to sing. The notes floated through the room, sweet and terrible, wrapping around Jack's heart, tugging at his soul. It was a voice older than the castle itself, older than the clouds, older than the beanstalk that had carried him here. The giant's wife appeared silently from the shadows, her face pale, her eyes filled with sorrow. "It sings," she said softly, "and it knows. Do not touch it. The harp does not belong to this world. It belongs to those who guard it, and to those who should never take it." Jack's fingers itched. The harp song seemed to reach into his bones, revealing glimpses of other worlds. Vast skies filled with stars, golden rivers that ran with light, shadowed forests where creatures older than humanity lurked, waiting. It was beautiful and terrifying, a gift and a curse wrapped in silver strings. And then came the sound he had learned to fear. Fee, fi, fo, fum. The giant's voice rolled through the castle, deeper, angrier, more alive. Every wall vibrated, every shadow stretched, clawing at Jack. The harp's song seemed to scream in response, a chorus of life and death entwined. Jack made his choice. He grabbed the harp, feeling its power hum through him. In that instant, he understood that he was no longer just a boy stealing gold. He was trespassing in a world older than the earth, a world ruled by ancient laws he could not hope to understand. The harp's cries pierced the hall, calling the giant awake. The castle shook, and from deep within came the sound of enormous feet pounding, shaking the walls and the clouds alike. Jack bolted, the harp wailing in his arms, a voice that was alive, a voice that knew his name and his heart. The beanstalk waited beneath him, twisting and pulsing, a living bridge between life and something far older, something far darker. Jack descended into the mist, clutching the singing harp, knowing that he had crossed a line that could never be undone. And above him, the giant watched, patient, eternal, and very, very hungry. The village slept under a sky heavy with clouds, unaware that a storm far older than the weather itself had begun. Jack stumbled into the empty streets, the harp cradled against his chest. Its strings sang a frantic, piercing melody, a song of warning that only he seemed to hear. The pulse of the beanstalk behind him throbbed like a heartbeat, alive, watching, almost judging. Then it came the rumble, a vibration that shook the earth, rolled through the trees, and rattled every shutter in the village. The giant had awakened. Fee, fi, fo, fum. The chant resonated across miles, through clouds and stone, echoing from the beanstalk itself. Jack's blood ran cold. He had heard the words before, but now they carried weight, menace, and memory. The memory of a being that had existed long before men dared count time. He ran. The harp's wailing grew louder, a siren's cry that called both danger and salvation. Shadows bent toward him, shifting unnaturally, as if the world itself were warning him or conspiring against him. From the sky above, the beanstalk groaned, twisting violently, as though the giant's anger could ripple down through its living fibers. Jack stumbled into the edge of the forest. Branches tore at his clothes, thorns lacerated his skin, but the boy barely noticed. All that mattered was escape. And yet, behind him, the sound of the giant's footsteps grew closer, heavier, each one like a drum of doom. Birds screamed and fled the trees. Wolves howled. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Through the mist, Jack saw his cottage, small and fragile against the looming presence above. He yelled for his mother, but his voice seemed swallowed by the air itself. The giant was not far behind. The earth trembled with each step. The boy reached the base of the beanstalk, clutching the harp with a desperate, trembling grip. With a heave, he began to climb. The vine pulsed under his fingers, alive, almost protective, carrying him upward, faster than he thought possible. The harp continued its wail, a mixture of fear and fury, echoing the giant's rage. Jack glanced down, and the village below was now just a shadow beneath clouds. He was ascending into realms mortals were never meant to touch. Above, the castle waited, and inside, the giant's rage boiled like molten stone. He was ancient, immense, and patient, with a hunger not just for flesh, but for the sanctity of his treasures, the sacred balance Jack had violated. The boy's thefts had torn open a world older than life itself. Jack's breath came in ragged gasps as he climbed higher, the harp thrumming against his chest. He realized, with a shiver that froze his blood, that he was no longer just fleeing a giant. He was fleeing an ancient, timeless justice, one older than kingdoms, older than man, one that would not forgive trespassers. And yet, Jack climbed, higher, faster, drawn not only by fear but by a strange, unrelenting need, an instinct older than survival. The clouds ahead twisted. Something moved within them. And from their midst, a shadow fell. The hunt had truly begun. Jack clung to the beanstalk, the wind tearing at his clothes and hair, the harp thrumming against his chest like a heartbeat that wasn't entirely his own. The clouds swallowed him whole, thick and suffocating, hiding the castle until it loomed above like a nightmare frozen in stone. Shadows shifted across its walls, carved faces twisting, mouths open in silent screams, eyes that seemed to bleed darkness. When Jack stepped through the towering doors, he realized the castle was alive in a way he had not understood. The air vibrated with power, thick and metallic, carrying whispers older than humanity itself. Every stone seemed to hum with memory. Every shadow breathed with a consciousness of its own. The giant's wife emerged silently from the darkness. Her eyes were sorrowful, tired, and infinitely old. "You climb again," she whispered, voice barely audible over the thrumming of the harp. "And yet, you do not see. The treasures are not simply gold, nor the hen simply flesh and feathers. These are symbols, relics of a world long gone." Jack frowned, gripping the harp tighter. "Relics?" he asked, voice shaking. "I don't understand." "They are the rewards of the soul," she said, glancing toward the shadows that stretched like fingers across the walls. "Music, sustenance, immortality. Each treasure you take, it takes a part of the world with it. And each time, the guardian awakens." A low rumble rolled through the castle. The giant was stirring. Jack felt it in his bones, a vibration older than stone, older than the beanstalk itself. He shivered as the air thickened with the giant's presence. "Fee, fi, fo, bum, I smell the blood of an Englishman." The voice was closer now, wrapping around the walls, the floor, the very air he breathed. Jack's eyes flicked to the harp, shimmering in the dim light. Its strings pulsed with a life of their own, singing a melody that felt like memory and warning intertwined. It was beautiful, it was terrifying, and it whispered truths he wasn't ready to hear. The giant's footsteps began to shake the floor. Jack's pulse quickened. Shadows seemed to stretch, pressing against him, testing him, waiting to see if he would falter. The castle itself groaned and twisted, like a living creature awakening from slumber. Every treasure he had taken whispered to him now, a chorus of secrets, beckoning him, warning him, offering power in exchange for risk. Jack realized, with a chill that ran down to his very bones, that he was no longer simply a boy stealing from a giant. He had entered a world older than the earth, where every step, every breath, and every stolen treasure carried weight beyond comprehension. He was trespassing in a realm of ritual, of myth, of life and death itself. And in the deep shadows, where the giant had yet to appear, Jack understood the truth. The beanstalk was not just a vine, the treasures were not just objects, and he was no longer just a boy. He had become part of something older, something waiting, something that would not forgive mistakes. The giant was awake. The castle trembled. Each step Jack took echoed like a drum of doom, announcing his presence to the monster above. The harp's song had shifted, no longer a melody of beauty. It was a wailing, urgent, a scream that warned both Jack and the giant that the sacred rules had been broken. And then he saw him. The giant stood at the top of the great hall, colossal beyond imagination. His skin was like stone, scarred and weathered by centuries. His eyes glimmered like molten gold, reflecting the firelight, but colder, emptier, hungry. Each breath came in slow, terrifying gusts, rattling the air and shaking Jack's very bones. Jack froze, heart hammering. The stories had not done justice to the monster. This was no mere creature. It was a force older than kings, older than empires, a living echo of a world that had long vanished, and now it was aware. Fee, fee, fo, fum. The chant rolled through the castle, a living thing, a vibration in the air that made Jack's teeth rattle. "I smell the blood of an Englishman." The voice was low, resonant, alive. It reached into Jack's chest, making his heart skip. The giant moved, each step a thunderclap. Shadows stretched across the hall, reaching, curling, trying to ensnare Jack before he could even think. His mind raced. escape, hide, survive. But there was nowhere to run, no corner of the hall untouched by the monster's presence. Jack gripped the harp, feeling its power thrumming in his hands. The strings pulsed like veins, alive with ancient knowledge. For a moment, he felt the pull of destiny or madness, urging him to act, to steal, to survive. The treasures he had taken, the golden hen, the bag of gold, they were not mere objects. They were keys, relics of a ritual older than man, and the giant was the keeper. The monster's hand reached down, massive and terrifying, each finger as wide as a tree trunk. Jack pressed the harp against his chest, the music screaming louder, clashing with the giant's roar, filling the hall with sound that shook the air and made the shadows writhe. Then, lightning of thought struck him. This was not just a fight for gold. This was a fight for life, for the right to leave this realm and return to the world of the living. Every beat of his heart, every pulse of the harp, every trembling breath of the giant carried the weight of millennia. Jack knew he had to climb, up, higher, past the shadows, past the anger, past the judgment. He darted toward the staircase, the giant's massive footfalls shaking the stone. The harp cried out, and the giant roared in response, a sound that would haunt Jack for the rest of his life. With a leap fueled by terror and desperation, Jack grabbed the stairs and ran. The giant's shadow loomed behind him, stretching impossibly, almost catching him. Jack's lungs burned, hands bled, and the castle itself seemed to tremble as if angry at the boy who dared steal from eternity. And yet, he climbed, faster, higher. Each step, a gamble between life and annihilation. The ancient world above and below him, the giant pursuing, the treasures clutched tight. Jack realized he had become something more than mortal. But the giant was patient, and patient was the deadliest of hunters. Jack's hands ached as he gripped the beanstalk, its twisting fibers alive beneath his fingers, pulsing with a strange energy that seemed to measure his worth. The harp cried in his arms, a piercing, wailing melody that clawed at his ears, warning him that the giant above was more than just flesh and bone. He was a force, older than memory, older than the sky, older than life itself. The wind whipped around him, tugging at his clothes, shredding the air with icy fingers. Clouds clung to the beanstalk, swirling like smoke, thick with the scent of ozone and something far more ancient, fear. Jack's pulse pounded in his ears as each step down became a gamble, the weight of the harp threatening to pull him into the void. Above, the giant roared, a sound that made the clouds tremble and the beanstalk quiver. Fee, fi, fo, fum. The voice rolled like thunder, echoing across the heavens, shaking the mist and bending the very fabric of the sky. Shadows stretched down the stalk, long and clawed, reaching for Jack, trying to ensnare him, trying to reclaim what had been taken. Branches snagged his clothes, thorns tore his skin, and each slip threatened to hurl him into the abyss. But Jack climbed faster, heart hammering, legs trembling, mind consumed by raw terror. He could feel the giant's presence above, patient, inevitable, the weight of centuries pressing down with every breath. The harp sang louder, almost desperate, strings vibrating in Jack's hands as though warning him of unseen dangers. Jack realized, with a cold shiver, that the treasures were not merely gold, not merely objects, they were alive. Each one held part of the world above, part of the sacred, and the giant was not just protecting wealth, but the balance between realms, a boundary older than life. He glanced down. The village was tiny, fragile, and impossibly far below. The ground seemed distant, unreal, like another world entirely. He screamed into the wind, a raw, desperate sound that carried neither joy nor hope, only the primal urge to survive. The beanstalk pulsed beneath him, almost sentient, guiding him, urging him onward. The harp's wailing matched the rhythm of his heartbeat, each note a warning, each string a thread in a tapestry of doom. Shadows clawed at his heels, the giant's breath shaking the air, but Jack's determination burned hotter than fear, and as he neared the ground, the impossible happened. The clouds above twisted violently, dark eyes appearing in their depths, watching, waiting. Jack felt the presence of something far older than the giant, a consciousness older than the earth itself, judging, calculating, and perhaps even amused. With one final heave, Jack landed on the earth, chest heaving, the harp clutched tight. The village seemed peaceful, untouched by the cosmic horror he had just escaped. But Jack knew better. Somewhere above, in the swirling clouds, the giant waited, and he would not forget. The beanstalk shivered, as if aware that its bridge had been defiled. And somewhere in the mist, the first whispers of retribution began to stir. Jack had survived, but the nightmare beneath the beans was far from over. The village was silent, the night air thick with unease. Jack thought he had escaped the giant, the castle, the horrors above, but the beanstalk pulsed behind him, alive in a way that made the hair on his arms stand on end. It towered into the clouds, twisting and coiling, a living monument to something older, darker, and more ancient than any boy could comprehend. He couldn't stop thinking about the harp. Its song, once beautiful, now thrummed in his mind even when it lay dormant. Every note carried echoes of the giant's world, whispers of lives that had been stolen, treasures that were never meant to leave their sacred realm. And now they were with him, vibrating with a life of their own, warning him or cursing him. Jack's hand shook as he approached the base of the beanstalk. He could feel it pulsing, thrumming like a heart, as if it were aware of his presence, aware of what he had done, aware of the fragile balance he had disrupted. Every tendril seemed to shift toward him, brushing against his legs and arms, cold and clammy like the touch of a dead thing. From within the stalk came a faint whisper, a voice ancient and cracked with time. "Return, return," it hissed. "Not a threat, a warning, a plea." Jack swallowed, realizing that this living tower was more than just a plant. It was a bridge between realms, a conduit of life and death, and he had trespassed. His mother's cottage appeared before him, warm and familiar, but he could not shake the sensation that the world had changed. The air felt heavier, shadows longer, and the wind itself seemed to carry voices, tiny, fragmented, desperate whispers that made his skin crawl. He had taken what was not his, and the beanstalk knew. Jack looked up. The clouds churned above, dark and roiling, as if the sky itself were alive and watching. Somewhere within that shifting mist, the giant waited. But now, Jack understood something deeper. The beanstalk was not just a ladder, and the treasures were not just gold, feathers, and strings. They were pieces of a ritual older than memory, fragments of life stolen from a world long forgotten. The whispers grew louder, repeating in a chorus that only he could hear. "Return, return, return." Jack shivered. Every instinct screamed to obey. And yet, he could not. The gold, the hen, the harp they burned with temptation, promises of power, safety, and a world that had always seemed out of reach. He had already crossed the line. There was no turning back. Somewhere in the village, a dog barked, shattering the tense silence. Jack's pulse quickened. The beanstalk pulsed again, stronger this time, almost impatient, a reminder that what he had done could not remain hidden. Something was coming, something ancient, something that would not forgive. And deep within the shadows, the first sense of dread took form. Jack was no longer just a boy climbing a vine. He was a trespasser in a world older than men, older than kingdoms, older than memory itself. And the nightmare beneath the beans had only just begun. Jack climbed again. The beanstalk groaned beneath his hands, alive, aware, and almost resentful. Each step toward the clouds felt heavier than the last, as if the very air were pressing down, trying to hold him back. The harp thrummed against his chest, a frantic heartbeat that matched his own. Its song was no longer just music, it was warning, screaming, alive. The castle appeared through the mist, grotesque and impossible. The walls seemed to breathe, twisting in ways that defied logic. Faces carved into the stone wept shadows. Their mouths whispered secrets that made Jack's skin crawl. The air smelled of iron and dust, old magic, and something far older, something that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. The giant's wife emerged, more spectral than human, her eyes deep pools of sorrow. "Do you understand now?" she whispered, voice trembling with centuries of grief. "You've taken what was never yours. These treasures, they carry the weight of a world that existed long before you. And now, the balance is broken." Jack shivered, clutching the harp. The hen in its cage glowed faintly, golden feathers vibrating with a strange energy, alive with something that was not meant for the mortal world. The bag of gold felt heavier in his pocket, as if it were aware, as if it had grown roots in his very soul. From the shadows came a sound, low, guttural, resonating through the stone floors. The giant was awake, but something was different. His form shifted and twisted, not fully human, not fully monstrous. He was a living echo of an older world, a guardian of secrets that predated humanity itself. Eyes appeared along his limbs, glowing, faintly, watching, calculating. Jack realized the truth, and terror clutched at his heart. The giant's wrath was not merely physical. It was supernatural, a force that could unravel reality, bending the very laws of the world to punish the trespasser. Every object he had stolen pulsed with energy, a beacon calling the guardian to him, a trap wrapped in temptation. Shadows lengthened, clawing at the walls, at the floors, even at Jack himself. He could feel them tugging at his skin, whispering, promising power, promising death. The harp sang back, crying out in agony, warning, trying to guide him. But Jack was caught between worlds, the mortal below, the immortal above, and the beanstalk connecting both like a twisting artery. And somewhere deep within the castle, the giant moved, patient and inevitable, closer with every heartbeat. Jack's fingers tightened around the harp strings. He understood now. This was not just theft, not just survival. This was a confrontation with forces older than the earth, older than kingdoms, older than human memory. And the castle itself had begun to awaken, reshaping in ways that reflected the ancient laws the giant guarded. Every step Jack took, every breath he drew, carried him further into a nightmare older than life itself. The beanstalk below was no longer just a ladder. It was a conduit, a bridge, a warning that what had been taken must be returned or claimed forever. And as the shadows shifted and the castle groaned, Jack realized that the true horror of the giant's realm was only beginning to reveal itself. Jack stepped deeper into the castle, and with every step, the stone beneath him groaned like a living thing. The walls no longer seemed static. They writhed, twisted, and pulsed with a dark life. Faces of past trespassers appeared in the stone, screaming silently, their eyes following him. Shadows stretched unnaturally, crawling along the floors and ceiling, whispering curses in languages older than memory. The harp in his arms wailed desperately, its silver strings vibrating with a power Jack did not fully understand. Its song seemed to push back the shadows, yet at the same time, drew the giant closer, as if each note were a beacon calling forth the wrath of the guardian. A deep rumble shook the floors. The giant emerged from the darkness, no longer just flesh and bone, but a vessel for something older. His eyes glowed like molten gold, and his form flickered, appearing at once humanoid and impossibly vast, limbs stretching beyond the boundaries of the castle. Each step caused the stone floors to shatter and reform, as if the very walls obeyed his will. Jack's breath came in ragged gasps. I didn't mean to. He stammered, but the harp's voice cut through, a high, piercing melody. Survive, survive, survive. The strings seemed to speak directly to his mind, guiding his instincts, warning him of each trap hidden in the castle's twisting corridors. The giant reached a massive hand toward Jack, and the walls themselves surged forward, narrowing the hallways. Stone tendrils lashed out like grasping fingers trying to pin him, but Jack darted, clutching the harp as it cried out a discordant, protective song. Every note seemed to carve a path through the living stone, carving a fragile way toward survival. Above, the ceiling shifted, opening into a void filled with stars, clouds, and shapes that defied human logic. Jack glimpsed realms beyond realms, lands of the dead, of gods, of ancient beings that predated humanity. The giant's realm was not merely a castle, it was a nexus, a living intersection between worlds, and Jack had trespassed. As he ran, Jack realized that the treasures he carried, the hen, the harp, the gold, were not just objects. He was protecting the fragile boundary between life and the otherworldly, between mortals and the echoes of civilizations that had vanished into myth. The walls closed in again. Jack's hands burned as he gripped the harp. Its song surged, a wailing, furious chorus that repelled the stone tendrils but drew the giant closer still. Every heartbeat became a countdown. Every shadow was alive. Every whisper was a warning of death. Jack understood one horrifying truth. The castle was alive. The giant was more than flesh. And the treasures he stole had awoken forces that would not rest until balance was restored or he was destroyed. The hunt had truly begun. Andy had reached a breaking point. Nights filled with terror, endless whispers, and the relentless presence of Chucky had left him exhausted and desperate. He knew he couldn't wait for help any longer. If he wanted to survive, he had to take action. The first counterattack was no longer optional. It was necessary. He spent the afternoon preparing. The house became his workshop, his battlefield. Every possible weapon was gathered: knives, heavy objects, even kitchen utensils that could serve as defensive tools. Andy barricaded the rooms he planned to use, creating choke points where he could corner the doll. Every move was strategic. There was no room for error. The doll, of course, sensed the change. Chucky had been patient, studying Andy's fear and hesitation, but now he faced a new challenge, a child who refused to be passive. That challenge intrigued him. The tiny killer watched, silent and calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Night fell. The house plunged into shadows, and Andy waited, heart pounding, every sense heightened. The first sound came from the hallway, a faint, deliberate tapping. Chucky emerged from the darkness, eyes gleaming maliciously, a sinister smile frozen on his face. The battle had begun. Andy lunged, brandishing a knife. Chucky moved with impossible speed, dodging effortlessly and countering with uncanny precision. The doll was small, but its movements were lethal, powered by the spirit of Charles Lee Ray. Andy stumbled backward, realizing that physical strength alone would not be enough. Strategy and wit would be his only advantage. The first clash was chaotic. The knife struck the floor, the doll dodged, and Andy improvised, tossing objects to distract it. Chucky responded in kind, using its tiny size and agility to strike from unexpected angles. The house echoed with the sounds of the struggle, crashes, clatters, and the sinister giggles of the doll. Andy remembered the practitioner's advice. Knowledge of the curse was power. He had to act quickly and deliberately, using the doll's patterns against it. He forced Chucky into a corner, trapping it temporarily between a wall and an overturned chair. For a moment it seemed victory was within his reach, but Chucky was patient. The doll wriggled free with a terrifying display of strength, eyes locked on Andy with malevolent amusement. It darted across the room, knocking over obstacles, sending shards of broken glass skittering across the floor. Andy realized the fight would not be easy. The doll was relentless, smart, and unyielding. The first counterattack ended without a clear victor, but it was a turning point. Andy had fought back, proving to himself and to Chucky that he was not a helpless victim. The battle had escalated, and the game had entered a new, more dangerous phase. As Andy caught his breath, staring at the doll perched silently on the windowsill, he understood one undeniable truth. Survival would require courage, cunning, and the willingness to confront a nightmare that refused to die. Chucky was still alive, and so was the fight. Jack stumbled into a vast chamber, walls stretching impossibly high, dripping with shadows that seemed to breathe. The air was thick with a metallic tang, the scent of something ancient and alive, and the temperature dropped, making his breath cloud before him. The harp thrummed violently, as if warning him, "Do not linger, do not touch, do not look." The treasures lay scattered, glowing with a sickly light. The The golden hen clucked softly, its eyes unnervingly intelligent, following Jack's every move. Its feathers seemed to pulse with the rhythm of his heartbeat. The bag of gold shimmered, coins rolling as if alive, whispering promises of power and safety, yet each glint carried an almost palpable threat. And then he saw it. The harp. No longer just a musical instrument, it floated above a pedestal of black stone, its strings vibrating on their own, casting light and shadows that moved like living creatures across the walls. Jack could hear voices within it, millennia of secrets, warnings, lamentations, and prayers trapped in its silver strings. It was beautiful, terrifying, and alive. A low, guttural rumble rolled through the chamber. The giant emerged, more terrifying than ever. His form flickered and stretched, limbs bending in ways that defied logic. His eyes burned like molten gold, and shadows coiled around him like serpents. "You dare enter my sanctum!" he bellowed, each word reverberating through the chamber, shaking the very stones. Jack's hands shook, the harp thrumming violently. He realized with dawning horror that this room was a crucible, a trap, a test. The treasures were not just wealth, they were embodiments of life, death, and ancient power. To take them was to steal from the balance of worlds, and the giant was the living enforcer. The shadows surged forward, tendrils, lashing at Jack. He ducked and rolled, clutching the harp, the golden hen hopping nervously beside him. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the treasures called to him, promising survival, protection, a way to escape the nightmare itself. Then the giant roared, and the chamber shifted. Walls extended, ceilings twisted, and the floor cracked. Jack realized with terror that the castle itself was alive, feeding off the treasures, feeding off fear, and he had become part of its ritual. The treasures pulsed with power, each beat synchronized with the harp's song. Jack understood. To escape, he could not just run. He had to survive the trial of the chamber, confront the giant, and face the nightmare that had haunted the world since before humans walked the earth. The harp screamed in his hands. The hen glared with golden eyes. The gold glimmered, almost taunting him. And from the shadows, the giant moved closer, inexorable, unstoppable, ancient as the soil itself. Jack had no choice. He had to act or be devoured by the nightmare he had unleashed. Jack's heart pounded as the giant advanced. Each step sent vibrations through the stone floor, like the heartbeat of an ancient, slumbering god. Shadows rippled outward, twisting into claws, fangs, and faces, all reaching for him, whispering in voices that belonged to the dead. The castle itself had become a predator, and he was prey. The harp pulsed violently, thrumming with an urgent, desperate rhythm. Jack realized the music was more than sound. It was power, a protective barrier, a lifeline. He held it tightly, feeling its energy surge into him, urging him to move, to survive, to fight. The golden hen shrieked, and golden feathers exploded into the air like shards of light, blinding the shadows and temporarily slowing the giant. Jack seized the moment. He grabbed the bag of gold, feeling it burn in his hands, heavy with otherworldly energy. Each coin vibrated, feeding the chamber's pulse, but also granting him strength. The giant roared, a sound so deep it shook the air, making Jack's bones rattle. "You dare steal what belongs to the old world!" the voice thundered. The shadows lunged, faster than thought, twisting and contorting into monstrous shapes. Jack dodged, rolled, and leapt, narrowly avoiding grasping claws and fanged shadows. The harp cried out, louder now, strings slicing through the chaos. Jack felt a strange clarity. He wasn't just running. He was navigating a living nightmare, reading the rhythms of the castle itself. Each note, each vibration, revealed a path, a fleeting gap through the horrors that sought to consume him. The giant's eyes blazed with fury, gold reflecting the chaos, shadows curling around him like serpents. Jack realized something horrifying. The giant was not merely a guardian of treasures. He was the embodiment of the castle's ancient will, the enforcement of a cosmic order that predated humanity. The treasures were not objects, they were anchors, and Jack had broken the balance. With a scream, Jack lunged toward the harp, thrusting his hands onto its silver strings. A shockwave of sound exploded outward, tearing at shadows, blasting back the giant. Light clashed with darkness, filling the chamber with blinding brilliance. Jack's ears rang, his vision blurred, but he held on, determined. The golden hen flapped its wings furiously, scattering sparks of magical energy. Coins flew, spinning in midair, circling Jack, forming a protective barrier. The giant roared again, lunging, but the harp's energy pulsed stronger, a shield and a weapon in one. Jack's mind raced. He understood at last. Survival meant more than fleeing. He had to master the treasures, harmonize their power, and force the giant and the castle to acknowledge him as more than a trespasser. Every heartbeat, every vibration of the harp, every golden shimmer was a thread in a battle older than men, older than kingdoms. The chamber trembled, shadows screamed, and the giant paused, sensing the shift. Jack's defiance, his cunning, his courage, however small, had awakened something within the ancient magic. The battle was far from over, but Jack had struck the first blow, and for the first time, he dared to believe he might survive the nightmare beneath the beans. Jack's chest heaved, sweat stinging his eyes, as he realized the chamber itself had joined the battle. Walls writhed, floors rippled, and ceilings twisted like living flesh, bending impossibly as if the castle were testing him, daring him to fail. The shadows no longer followed predictable paths. They lunged unpredictably, slithering across stone, merging, splitting, and attacking from angles that defied reason. The giant's roar reverberated through the halls, but Jack noticed something odd. The creature seemed slower, reacting to the rhythm of the harp. He tightened his grip, letting its song flow through him. Each note struck the shadows, splintering them, forcing them to retreat, while the golden hen flapped its wings furiously, scattering sparks of radiant light that seared the darkness. The bag of gold throbbed in Jack's hands, every coin alive with energy. He realized the treasures were not just tools, they were extensions of the realm. Pieces of the castle's ancient magic. To survive, he had to command them, not just cling to them. With trembling hands, Jack lifted the harp higher, letting the music resonate in harmony with the pulsing gold. The chamber reacted violently. Stone walls quaked, shadows screamed, and the giant's shape flickered, unstable, like a candle in the wind. Jack felt a surge of power, a connection forming between himself, the treasures, and the living castle. But the castle would not yield easily. Stone spikes erupted from the floor, clawing at his ankles. Ceilings bent down like jaws ready to crush him. Shadows formed monstrous shapes, eyes burning with ancient fury, whispering in, voices older than any language Jack had ever known. Jack leapt, narrowly avoiding the snapping stone, landing near a narrow passage where the harp's song pulsed strongest. The hen and gold followed, forming a shield of light and energy around him. Every heartbeat synchronized with the treasures, and Jack realized if he could control them, even for a moment, he might bend the castle itself. The giant lunged again, immense and terrifying, but Jack's hands moved with newfound precision. Strings plucked, feathers shimmered, gold spun in protective spirals. The combined energy formed a wave of power that forced the giant back, knocking him into the shadows from which he had emerged. The castle groaned in protest. Walls twisted, corridors warped, but Jack pressed forward, guided by the pulse of the treasures. He could feel the boundaries of the chamber bending, the reality of the giant's domain stretching, and yet, for the first time, he sensed control. He was no longer just a victim, he was a player in an ancient game, a trickster hero fighting forces far older than himself. Above, the clouds churned, the castle trembled, and the giant's eyes burned with both fury and fear. Jack knew the battle was far from over, but for the first time, hope surged within him. He had turned the tide, even if only for a moment. And as he moved deeper into the living nightmare, Jack realized something chilling. The castle, the giant, and the treasures were testing him not merely to punish, but to see if he was worthy of what he had taken. The nightmare was far from over. But Jack was no longer just running. He was fighting. Jack stumbled into a hidden chamber, unlike any part of the castle he had seen. The walls glimmered with faint veins of gold and silver, pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm like a heartbeat. The shadows seemed hesitant here, recoiling slightly, as if sensing something powerful and forbidden. The giant's roar echoed distantly, unable to penetrate this sanctum. At the center of the room stood a massive root, twisting upward into the ceiling and disappearing into darkness. Its bark glowed faintly with an inner light, veins of energy running through it like molten fire. Jack realized with a jolt. This was the heart of the beanstalk itself, the source of its life, its power, its connection between realms. The harp hummed urgently in his hands, vibrating in perfect sync with the pulsing root. The hen clucked, feathers glowing brighter than ever, and the bag of gold felt impossibly heavy, anchoring him to the mortal world. Together, the treasures seemed to form a link, a key to something greater, something that might finally give him leverage over the giant. A sudden whisper filled the chamber, ancient and melodic, flowing through Jack's mind. Balance must be restored. Trespasser, prove worthy. The words were neither threatening nor comforting, simply a command, a truth older than memory. Jack understood. The treasures were not merely objects to steal. They were part of a ritual, a living puzzle, a trial designed to test those who dared trespass into the giant's domain. With trembling hands, Jack placed the harp against the glowing root. The chamber shuddered violently, and tendrils of golden light shot out, wrapping around the treasures, binding them into a single coherent force. The giant's roar thundered closer, but something had shifted. The castle itself seemed to hesitate, as if uncertain how to respond to this new power. Jack's pulse raced. He could feel the energy coursing through him, through the treasures, through the very heart of the beanstalk. For the first time, he sensed the scope of what he had stolen, and the possibility that he could control it. Not fully, not yet, but enough to survive. And then he saw it, a vision within the root, shimmering like mist. The giant, the treasures, the castle, and the beanstalk itself, all part of a living network, a cosmic web connecting life and death, the mortal world and the otherworldly. Jack realized with awe and terror that he was not merely trespassing, he had stepped into the engine of an ancient order, one that had existed long before humans, long before kingdoms, long before memory itself. The whispers returned, now urgent, insistent. Act or perish. The balance is fragile. Jack understood his choice. Wield the power of the treasures and the heart of the beanstalk to survive, or fall and be claimed forever by the giant and the living nightmare he had disturbed. He swallowed hard, gripping the harp, holding the hen, and balancing the weight of the gold. The chamber pulsed in response, alive, listening, waiting. And somewhere above, the giant hesitated, sensing the shift, realizing that this boy was no longer just a thief. He was becoming something far more dangerous. Jack had discovered the heart of the nightmare, and now he would have to learn how to wield it. Jack felt the pulse of the beanstalk's heart through the harp in his hands. The golden hen clucked with sharp intensity, its feathers glowing brighter than ever, and the bag of gold throbbed with energy, as if alive. He realized that the treasures were not just tools, they were extensions of the castle itself. And if he could synchronize with them, he might bend the nightmare to his will. The shadows shrieked, writhing and lashing across the walls, sensing his newfound power. Each tendril reached toward him, probing for weakness, but Jack moved in rhythm with the harp's song, the hen's glowing light, and the weight of the gold. He began to understand their patterns, how the castle reacted, how the labyrinthine corridors twisted to punish or trap intruders. With a deliberate strike of the harp, a wave of light spread through the chamber. The shadows recoiled violently, hissing like snakes. Stone floors cracked and reformed, corridors lengthened and shortened at his whim. The Pemet castle was alive, but it was listening. And now, Jack could speak to it not in words, but in the pulse of the treasures, in the rhythm of sound and light. The giant's roar echoed from above, a terrifying reminder that his enemy was still near. But Jack's confidence grew. If he could manipulate the castle, he could control the battlefield. The tendrils of stone and shadow no longer chased him mindlessly. They became obstacles he could predict, avoid, even weaponize. He raised the harp again, letting the strings vibrate in harmony with the heartbeat of the beanstalk. The golden hen flapped, feathers scattering light across the walls, illuminating safe paths and weak points in the castle's structure. The bag of gold pulsed, anchoring him to the mortal world and stabilizing the castle's unpredictable shifts. Jack realized the truth. The treasures were not merely guardians of wealth. They were instruments of ancient power, designed to test mortals, challenge cunning, and measure worth. And now, he had begun to pass that test. A new understanding settled over him. The giant was not invincible. The castle, while alive, was responsive, and Jack, clever, daring, and desperate, was learning to play the nightmare like a game of intricate, deadly chess. The shadows surged one final time, forming monstrous shapes, but Jack met them with the light of the hen, the resonance of the harp, and the weight of the gold. For the first time, he was no longer running. He was commanding. The giant would soon learn that this boy was no longer just a thief. He was a master of the nightmare. Jack ascended the highest corridor of the castle, the heart of the beanstalk pulsing with every step. Shadows writhed beneath his feet, curling like serpents. Yet now they obeyed the rhythm of the harp. The golden hen flapped fiercely, scattering light across the corridors, and the bag of gold throbbed with energy, tethering him to the mortal world. Ahead, the giant waited. No. His longer a simple brute, he had become a towering amalgam of stone, shadow, and ancient magic. His eyes blazed molten gold, limbs stretching impossibly, and every breath rumbled like an approaching storm. Jack's hands trembled as he tightened his grip on the harp. This is it, he thought. The final reckoning. He lifted the instrument high, letting the strings vibrate in harmony with the castle's heartbeat. The shadows recoiled, the stone corridors quivered, and for the first time, the giant paused, sensing the shift in power. With a roar that shook the clouds outside, the giant lunged. Jack struck the harp strings with precision, sending waves of sound cascading through the corridor. The vibrations bent the castle itself, folding walls and ceilings to trap parts of the giant, slowing him, making him stumble. The hen screeched and flapped, releasing bursts of golden light that seared the air and licked at the giant's massive form. The coins in the bag spun, creating a protective vortex around Jack, deflecting tendrils of shadow and shards of stone. The giant roared again, fury and disbelief in his voice. "You dare defy me?" He swung a massive hand, sending a shockwave through the corridor. Jack jumped, landing on a wall that had suddenly become a floor, harp thrumming in response to the pulse of the castle. He realized that the castle, the giant, and the treasures were all connected, like gears in a machine, and he had learned to manipulate them. With a final desperate strike, Jack plucked the harp strings in a sequence he didn't fully understand, letting the treasure's combined energy surge through the castle. The corridors shifted violently, walls closing in on the giant, shadows pulling back, stone reshaping itself into cages, barriers, and spikes that restrained him. The giant howled, a sound that shook clouds, sky, and earth alike. But Jack did not flinch. He felt the pulse of the beanstalk beneath him, the rhythm of ancient magic flowing through the harp, through the hen, through the gold. For the first time, he was not fleeing. He was commanding the nightmare, and the castle listened. Jack stood in the heart of the castle, the giant trapped by the shifting walls and the pulse of the treasures. But even restrained, the colossal figure radiated an aura of ancient power, older than kingdoms, older than humans themselves. The harp thrummed in Jack's hands, the golden hen clucked warningly, and the coins spun around him in a protective whirlwind. Then, a whisper echoed through the chamber, low and melodic, carrying with it a dreadful truth. You steal what was never meant to leave, but some truths demand to be known. The giant's eyes, molten and piercing, fixed on Jack, and he spoke not with rage, but with the weight of aeons. "I am the guardian," the giant rumbled, his voice vibrating the very air, not merely of gold, nor of magic, nor of fleeting mortal treasures, I guard the line between worlds, the living and the dead, the human and the divine. Each object you hold, each coin, each feather, each note of that harp, they are fragments of the world beyond, anchors of balance. Jack swallowed hard, the pulse of the harp trembling through his arms. He had stolen without understanding, fled without knowing, and yet here he was, alive, facing a being older than memory itself. The giant continued, "For thousands of years I have waited, maintaining the bridge between realms, ensuring that mortals do not tamper with the threads of fate. And yet, here you are, small, reckless, daring, and you survive the maze, the shadows, the living castle. You are more cunning than many before you." The chamber pulsed violently as if the beanstalk itself reacted to the revelation. Shadows twisted, shimmering with ancient sigils, and Jack realized the truth. The treasures were not merely magical, they were sacred. The hen, the gold, the harp, they were relics of civilizations long lost, of rituals meant to preserve the balance between life and death. The giant's gaze softened, and a shiver of understanding passed through Jack. "Your world knows not of what lies beyond," the guardian whispered. "But every act of greed, of theft, of daring, reshapes the boundary. You must choose. Return what you have taken, or risk unraveling the bridge forever." Jack felt the weight of aeons pressing down, the pulse of the beanstalk coursing through him. For the first time, he understood that this story was never about wealth, or glory, or cleverness. It was about balance, about life and death, and the consequences of daring to cross a line that mortals were never meant to touch. And yet, even as he trembled, Jack felt the stirring of something darker, something that whispered of defiance, of cunning, of the trickster's way. The journey was far from over. The giant was a guardian, yes, but Jack was no ordinary boy, and the nightmares that waited beyond the clouds were only beginning to stir. The chamber fell into silence, but Jack knew it was temporary. The giant's eyes, molten gold and infinite in depth, followed him as he stepped forward, the harp vibrating faintly in his hands. The golden hen clucked nervously, feathers glowing with a restless energy, while the bag of gold pulsed like a heartbeat, warning him that the trial was beginning. Suddenly, the shadows erupted from the walls, no longer just tendrils or shapes, but monstrous figures formed from centuries of fear, malice, and forgotten memories. Faces twisted in anguish, eyes hollow, hands reaching out as if to drag him into the void. Jack realized these were not mere illusions. They were the echoes of every intruder, every trespasser who had failed before him. The giant's voice resonated through the chamber, deep and calm. "To claim the treasures as your own, you must pass through the realm of what you fear. Only the cunning and brave may survive." Jack's pulse quickened. He gripped the harp tightly and lifted it high. Its silver strings hummed in response, sending waves of light across the chamber. The shadows recoiled but quickly regrouped, surging toward him with renewed ferocity. The hen flapped furiously, sending sparks of golden light that sliced through the darkness. Each coin in the bag spun in midair, forming a protective shield that deflected the grasping hands of the shadowy figures. Jack realized that he had to act, not just defend. He began to pluck the harp's strings, each note carefully chosen, harmonizing with the pulse of the beanstalk. The shadows hesitated, twisting and shivering in confusion. Jack felt the rhythm of the castle, the heartbeat of the ancient magic, and moved with it. Every step became a dance of light and shadow, a battle of rhythm and cunning. The faces in the darkness whispered temptations, fear, doubt, visions of failure, images of his mother weeping, the cow lost forever. But Jack's resolve hardened. He struck a chord so pure and strong that the chamber itself seemed to pulse with energy, pushing back the shadows and forming a glowing path forward. The giant's voice returned, approving but grave. "Clever, but this is only the beginning. To survive, you must learn to command the shadows, not merely repel them. Fear is a tool, a bridge, a weapon. Only then will you understand the power you have taken." Jack's chest heaved. The harp thrummed, the hen glowed, the gold spun, and in that moment, he realized that this trial was not just of strength or bravery, but of understanding. He must master fear itself, or be consumed by it. And deep within the twisting corridors of the castle, the shadows waited, patient and relentless, ready to test him again and again. Jack stepped into a new chamber, and instantly the air shifted. The walls stretched endlessly, covered with smooth reflective surfaces. Each mirror distorted reality, showing impossible reflections, twisted versions of himself, his mother's fearful face, and the giant looming over him with hundreds of eyes. The harp vibrated nervously in his hands, the hen's glow flickered, and the coins spun with anxious energy. The giant's voice echoed through the maze. "Here, you will confront not me, but yourself. Every shadow, every fear, every desire will be amplified. Only those who see clearly may pass." Jack's pulse raced. The maze was alive, a labyrinth of illusions and traps. Every step brought a new reflection, some mocking, some threatening, some whispering secrets of past failures and future doom. He could feel the weight of centuries pressing down, each reflection trying to twist his mind, make him stumble, make him run blindly. He gripped the harp tightly, letting its resonant strings guide him. The golden hen flapped, sending streaks of light that cut through the mirages, revealing paths that were real. Coins spun rapidly around him, forming a protective circle, deflecting shards of mirror that shot like daggers from the walls. Jack realized the maze wasn't just about navigation, it was testing perception. The reflections weren't enemies themselves, but traps for the mind. Some showed fear, others greed, pride, or despair. To survive, he had to ignore the illusions and trust in the pulse of the treasures, the rhythm of the harp, and the guiding glow of the hen. A distorted version of Jack lunged from a mirror, screaming his own name. Jack dodged, striking the harp with a powerful chord. Sound waves shattered the false reflection, sending fragments of glass clattering to the floor. Another mirror revealed the giant reaching for him from above, but he knew it was only a trick. The real giant remained outside, still trapped. This maze was another test. He advanced slowly, deliberately, reading the reflections, distinguishing the lies from the truth. Each correct step made the harp hum stronger, the hen's light steadier, and the gold's pulse more solid. The maze resisted, twisting and shifting, but Jack's resolve hardened. Finally, after what felt like hours, he reached the heart of the labyrinth, a chamber where no mirrors existed, only a single, faintly glowing doorway. The shadows had receded, and the giant's distant roar was quieter, almost reluctant. Jack knew the maze had changed him. He had confronted fear, doubt, and desire, and survived. But the challenges ahead were even darker. The heart of the castle awaited, and the giant still lurked, furious and ancient, ready to reclaim what Jack had stolen. Jack emerged from the labyrinth, the harp still vibrating in his hands, the hen glowing like a beacon, and the gold pulsating with life. Ahead loomed a vast chamber that stretched beyond sight, its walls spiraling upward and downward simultaneously. The air was thick with magic, a humming tension that made his skin crawl and his hair stand on end. At the center of the chamber rose the beanstalk itself, massive beyond imagination. Its bark shimmered like living metal, veins glowing with energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. And wrapped around it, coiled in layers of shadow and light, was the giant. No longer a mere brute, he had become a creature of raw, primordial power, fused with the magic of the beanstalk, its guardian and its essence. Jack's heart pounded, but he knew he could not retreat. This was the source, the core of the nightmare, the throne of the giant, the secret behind every treasure he had claimed. He stepped forward, every footfall echoing through the chamber, like a drumbeat of fate. The giant's voice resonated, deep and layered, seeming to come from the walls, the floor, and the very air itself. "You have come far, mortal, but you understand nothing. These treasures are not mere wealth, they are pieces of the world beyond, fragments of life and death, threads of the balance. Steal without wisdom, and you doom yourself." Jack tightened his grip on the harp. He had learned much in the shadows, in the maze, in the pulse of the beanstalk. He could feel the flow of power now, how the harp's song, the hen's glow, and the gold's weight interacted with the living magic of the castle. He was no longer a thief, he was a participant in the ancient rhythm of the realm. Tentatively, he plucked a single note from the harp. The beanstalk shivered, the giant's coils rippled, and the chamber hummed in response. The shadows that had clung to the giant began to swirl, forming visions of the past, ancient civilizations, forgotten rituals, and guardians who had held the line between worlds. Jack saw the purpose behind it all. The treasures, the trials, the castle itself were not punishments. They were tests, designed to determine who could wield the power without destroying it. A low growl emanated from the giant, vibrating the air. "Do you dare claim knowledge of the beyond, boy?" it thundered. "Do you dare seize the heart of what mortals were never meant to touch?" Jack swallowed hard, the pulse of the harp syncing with the rhythm of the beanstalk. He stepped closer to the root at the center, feeling the raw, terrifying energy of the world beyond. Every shadow, every echo, every heartbeat of the giant resonated through him. The treasures weren't just tools, they were keys. And now, Jack was ready to use them. With a deep breath, he lifted the harp high, letting the strings vibrate in perfect harmony with the giant, the beanstalk, and the treasures. The chamber roared in response, light and shadow swirling, the air thick with power, and the giant's voice softened, almost reverent. "Then show me, mortal, show me what you are made of." Jack's journey had brought him to the very edge of life and death, the threshold of worlds. The nightmare beneath the beans had revealed its ultimate secret. And now, it was his turn to shape it. Jack's hands trembled, yet determination hardened his grip on the harp. The golden hen's feathers shimmered violently, casting streaks of blinding light across the chamber, and the bag of gold spun rapidly, creating a protective vortex around him. The beanstalk pulsed like a living entity, thrumming with power that seemed to answer Jack's will. The giant towered above him, fused with the magic of the beanstalk, a creature part flesh, part shadow, part living plant. Its eyes glowed molten gold, and each movement sent tremors through the spiraling chamber. "You dare?" it bellowed, voice vibrating with centuries of ancient authority. Jack struck the harp with precision, unleashing a chord that rippled through the chamber. Shadows twisted violently, forming barriers and tentacles to intercept him, but Jack had learned their patterns. He dodged, weaved, and directed the light of the hen to scorch the dark appendages, illuminating weak points in the giant's form. The golden coins circled him, spinning with increasing speed, deflecting shards of enchanted bark that the giant flung from its massive coils. Each treasure worked in harmony with the others, the harp shaping energy, the hen lighting the way, and the gold anchoring him to the mortal world while amplifying the pulse of the beanstalk. The giant roared and lunged, and the chamber shook violently, twisting corridors and pillars into impossible angles. Jack leapt onto a shifting wall, strumming the harp in an intricate rhythm that resonated with the very heart of the beanstalk. The giant's massive hand swiped through a wall of shadow, only to meet shimmering light that drove it back. "You are clever, boy," the giant growled, "but cleverness alone will not save you." Its coils whipped violently, striking the floor, walls, and ceiling, attempting to crush Jack in an instant. Yet Jack responded with rapid chords, guiding the beanstalk itself to twist and shift, blocking the giant's attacks and creating narrow pathways for him to maneuver. A surge of energy pulsed from the root of the beanstalk, through the harp, into Jack. He realized the truth. The giant and the castle were connected, a single entity. To defeat the Guardian, he must not destroy. It would destroy the balance. He must master it. With a deep breath, Jack played a single, sustained chord. The light from the hen intensified. The gold spun faster, and the shadows froze mid-strike. The giant paused, its molten eyes widening as it felt the rhythm of its own power being mirrored, controlled, and redirected. Jack advanced, weaving through shifting corridors and shadowy limbs, each movement precise, each chord measured. He was no longer a boy stealing treasures. He was a conductor of the nightmare itself, bending the pulse of the beanstalk, the Guardian, and the chamber to his will. The giant's roar echoed through the clouds above, but Jack pressed forward, ready to claim the final triumph. The nightmare beneath the beans was no longer a threat, it was a challenge he had learned to command. Jack paused at the core of the chamber, the harp thrumming in his hands, the hen glowing like a blazing sun, and the gold spinning with a pulse that seemed alive. He studied the giant, coiled around the beanstalk, its molten eyes burning with fury and disbelief. Every attack had been parried, every shadow controlled, but now it was time to end this. He realized that the giant was not merely an enemy, it was the living embodiment of the beanstalk's magic, the guardian of the balance between worlds. To defeat it was not to destroy, but to redirect its energy, to force it to acknowledge a new master of the ancient powers. Jack struck a chord unlike any before, letting the vibration flow through the harp, into the beanstalk, and into the giant itself. The light of the hen flared, illuminating every shadow, every tendril, every fold of the chamber. The gold pulsed violently, reinforcing his connection to the world below, grounding him as the forces of life and death swirled around him. The giant roared, a sound that shook clouds, walls, and Jack's very bones. It lashed its massive limbs, sending waves of shadow and stone crashing toward him. But Jack moved with precision, playing chords that reshaped the chamber, bending shadows to form barriers, directing the pulses of energy to guide the giant's own power against itself. He leapt onto the beanstalk itself, climbing into the coils that wrapped the chamber like a living labyrinth. Each step pulsed with energy, each note of the harp resonated with the heartbeat of the world beyond. The giant thrashed, but its movements now followed the rhythm Jack set. The nightmare, once uncontrollable, was bending to him. With a final, sustained chord, Jack unleashed a wave of pure resonance. The giant froze, caught in a cage of light and sound, forced to see the truth of its existence and the boy who now commanded the treasures. The shadows collapsed, the beanstalk shimmered, and the chamber fell into a tense, humming silence. The giant spoke one last time, its voice low, reverent, and echoing across time. "You have mastered the nightmare. But remember, power is a burden, not a gift. Guard it well, or it will devour you as it did countless others." And then, with a surge of energy, the giant's form dissolved into pure light, merging with the beanstalk itself, leaving the chamber alive but calm, the treasures still pulsing gently with latent power. Jack stood at the center, victorious, yet humbled. He had claimed mastery, but he knew the stakes were far greater than gold or glory. The nightmare beneath the beans had been conquered not with brute strength, but with cunning, courage, and understanding. Jack now held not just treasures, but the secret heartbeat of an ancient world, a power older than memory, and the knowledge of how fragile the line between life, death, and magic truly was. Jack descended the beanstalk. Slowly, the harp humming softly in his hands, the golden hen glowing faintly, and the coins spinning in a steady rhythm. The castle above had grown quiet, no longer a living labyrinth of shadows and fear, but a monument to his triumph. Every step down, he felt the pulse of the treasures connecting him to both worlds, a bridge of life and death he now partially controlled. But when he reached the ground, nothing looked as he remembered. The village was cloaked in a strange, heavy mist, colors muted as if drained by unseen hands. The air hummed faintly, resonating with the same rhythm he had felt inside the castle. Something was different. Something had changed. His mother ran toward him, worry etched on her face, but her eyes flickered strangely, like they were catching glimpses of things unseen. The cow was gone, not taken, but vanished into thin air. Even the soil seemed restless beneath his feet, as if aware of the power he carried. Jack realized the treasures were not just objects, they were conduits. Every coin, every feather, every note from the harp carried echoes of the other world. By bringing them into the mortal realm, he had begun to blur the line between life and the hidden world beyond. Shadows moved at the corners of his vision, faint whispers curling in the wind. The golden hen clucked, wings fluttering nervously. The harp vibrated in Jack's hands, reminding him of the giant's warning: power is a burden. Each treasure's pulse resonated with the heartbeat of the unseen, hinting that forces beyond his understanding were now aware of him, watching, waiting. Jack knew that the village, once ordinary, was now part of something larger. The treasure's magic demanded attention, respect, and care. He had survived the nightmare, mastered the castle, and defeated the Guardian, but the consequences were only beginning. As the mist thickened and the shadows whispered, Jack tightened his grip on the harp and clutched the hen close. He had returned. But the world he came back to was no longer safe, no longer familiar. The line between mortal and otherworldly had shifted, and he was standing right on it. Somewhere, high above, the beanstalk trembled, a reminder that the nightmare beneath the beans was not gone. It was merely watching, waiting for its next move. The mist that cloaked the village thickened as Jack walked through the narrow streets, the golden hen clucking nervously, the harp vibrating faintly in his hands, and the coins spinning like restless spirits. Windows reflected strange shapes, shadows that didn't belong to any object or person, moving independently as if alive. Villagers whispered in hushed, fearful tones, eyes darting toward corners where nothing should exist. Children hid behind doorways, their laughter strangely hollow, replaced by murmurs of fear. Jack's heart sank. His triumph in the castle had not returned normalcy, but awakened something old, something that had been dormant for millennia. He paused near the well at the center of the village, noticing ripples that shimmered unnaturally, as though reflecting a sky that didn't exist. The harp thrummed in response, a low, warning vibration that ran through Jack's arms. The golden hen flapped and pecked at the ground, scattering sparks of light that briefly pushed the shadows back, but only for a moment. Jack realized that the treasures were amplifying the hidden realm, bringing its echoes into the mortal world. The golden eggs glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the heartbeat of the village itself. Every note of the harp sent ripples through the mist. Every coin stirred invisible currents. The line between the living and the unseen was thinning. And then, the whispers became voices, faint but urgent. They spoke in tongues Jack did not know, voices of guardians, watchers, and ancient beings warning of imbalance. Some promised aid. Others threatened ruin. The golden hen clucked sharply, wings bristling, as the first true shadow of the other world appeared, a massive, dark figure flickering at the edge of the mist, observing, waiting, patient. Jack understood. His journey was far from over. The treasures had returned with him, but they were not inert objects. They carried responsibility, danger, and power beyond imagination. And now, the world he knew, his village, his home, was a stage for forces older than memory, forces that would not rest until the balance was restored. He tightened his grip on the harp, tucked the hen safely under his arm, and prepared to face the first true challenge of the treasures in the mortal world. The nightmare beneath the beans had followed him home, and it would not forgive mistakes. The night fell quickly, thick and unnatural, blanketing the village in a fog that seemed to pulse with life. Jack moved cautiously down the main street, the golden hen clucking urgently in his arms and the harp vibrating with a low, warning hum. Shadows slithered along the walls, stretching unnaturally long, converging in corners where no light reached. Then the first figure appeared. A man, or something that had once been a man, emerged from the mist. His skin glimmered like wet clay, eyes empty yet aware, limbs jerking as if pulled by invisible strings. Jack froze, realizing this was no ordinary ghost or villager. It was a fragment of the other world, drawn to the treasures he carried. The golden hen flared, casting a protective halo of light, while the harp vibrated violently. Jack raised it and struck a single note, sending a wave through the mist. The figure recoiled, its distorted shape twisting in agony. Yet it did not disappear. It hissed and lurched forward, drawing closer, a dark, living echo of the unseen realm. Jack's mind raced. He had survived the castle, mastered the giant, and confronted the nightmare. But this was different. This threat was here, in the mortal world, and innocent people could be caught in its path. He realized the treasures were a beacon, a bridge, and each use of their power strengthened the pull of the other world. He struck the harp again, weaving the light of the hen and the spinning gold into a protective barrier around the first figure. It shrieked, a sound that seemed to scrape the air itself, then collapsed into the mist, dissipating but leaving a stain on the village. a residual echo of its presence. Jack exhaled, knowing this was only the beginning. The treasures had drawn attention, awakened the watchers of the other world, and now the village was the battlefield. Every shadow, every whisper, every flicker of mist could hide another intruder, another fragment, seeking to reclaim what he had taken. He tightened his grip on the harp and clutched the hen closer, stepping forward into the fog. The night was alive with whispers, shadows, and movements unseen, and Jack understood that to protect his home, he must confront this new nightmare directly. The first reckoning had begun, and the nightmare beneath the beans was no longer confined to the castle. It had arrived in the world of the living. The village trembled under the thick, pulsing mist. Shadows moved like living tendrils, curling around rooftops and street corners, eyes glinting with hunger and malice. Jack stood in the center of the square, the golden hen tucked under his arm, the harp glowing with every note vibrating like the heartbeat of the world itself, and the spinning gold circling him as a protective storm. The largest shadow emerged first, a towering figure, its form shifting between man and beast, a living echo of the giant's ancient power. Its voice rumbled from the fog, resonating deep in Jack's chest. "You have trespassed where mortals should not tread. The treasures belong to the realm beyond. Surrender them, or be consumed." Jack's pulse raced, but fear no longer ruled him. He had climbed the beanstalk, survived the maze, faced the giant, and returned with the spear. Treasures. Now, he understood their rhythm, their power, their connection to life and death. He struck the harp, unleashing a chord that cut through the mist like silver lightning, the hen flaring with radiant light and the spinning gold glowing with an unearthly intensity. The shadow lunged, tendrils of darkness striking, twisting, trying to tear at Jack's form. But he moved with precision, weaving light, sound, and motion in perfect harmony. Every note from the harp reshaped the battlefield. Every feathered flare of the hen illuminated the shadow's weakness, and every gold coin spun to form a barrier, redirecting the attacks back toward the encroaching darkness. Jack realized the truth. The shadow was not just an enemy, it was a guardian of balance, a test of whether he could wield power responsibly. With the right combination of courage, cunning, and understanding, he could seal it back, returning the nightmare to its rightful place. He climbed atop the fountain at the center of the square, raising the harp high. Striking a final, resonant chord, Jack channeled all the treasure's power, every pulse, every glow, every vibration. The mist convulsed, the shadows shrieked, and the massive figure reeled, trapped within a cage of light and sound. The golden hen clucked triumphantly, feathers flaring as beams of radiant energy pierced the fog. The spinning gold aligned, forming a glowing circle beneath the shadow, anchoring it back to the other world. The figure let out a final roar that echoed through the village, then vanished, leaving only silence and a faint, shimmering afterimage of the beanstalk's magic. The mist began to lift, revealing the village in the pale light of dawn. The streets were quiet, the villagers cautiously emerging from their homes, eyes wide with awe. Jack set down the treasures carefully, knowing their power was immense and dangerous. He had survived, yes, but more importantly, he had learned. Power without understanding could destroy everything. Wisdom could shape it. Jack looked up at the sky, where the beanstalk still shimmered faintly in the distance. The climb had ended, but the memory of its trials would echo forever. He had faced giants, shadows, and nightmares, and now he carried their legacy responsibly. The nightmare beneath the beans was conquered, and for the first time, Jack understood the true weight of courage, cunning, and choice. The world had shifted, quietly and irrevocably. Jack had returned not just as a boy who stole treasures, but as a keeper of ancient secrets, a master of shadows, and the last bridge between the mortal world and the mysteries that lay beyond the clouds. And somewhere, far above, the beanstalk pulsed faintly, waiting for the next brave soul, for the next story, for the next climb.